I'm not going to begin with dopamine addiction or the cliches about short-form thinking. All of that is already noise. We're going somewhere else, to the place where attention itself was transformed into a commodity. Let's start with a simple experiment. You blink constantly, yet you never think about it. And now, please, blink. And again, blink. At this moment, the thought had lodged itself in your mind. The brain starts tracking the rhythm, the frequency, the sensation, something it was doing automatically just seconds ago.
This tiny intervention reveals a central truth. Attention can be intercepted, recalibrated, and redirected even without your consent. Tech leaders understood this long before the public did. Sean Parker admitted Facebook was deliberately engineered to capture human time. Steve Jobs banned his own children from using the iPad. Elon Musk warned openly about the corrosive effect of social platforms on teenagers. Sam Altman now talks about the cognitive cost of feed-based living. And here is the question. If a simple request to blink can shift your internal process, then what does an endless feed do to you? A feed that knows exactly where your eyes will pause. A feed that adjusts itself to your reactions. And what does an algorithm do, the one that knows what you'll finish, what you'll skip, and what will bring you back tomorrow?
Today's average adult spends more than 2 hours a day inside social platforms. Teenagers, close to 5. That's not usage, that's a second life, running parallel to the real one. 2 decades ago, people stayed on a screen for 2.5 minutes, today 40-50 seconds. Not because humans changed, but because the environment did. And this environment didn't begin with YouTube, Instagram or TikTok, whose combined valuation, by the way, exceeds $6 trillion. More than GDP of Germany and United Kingdom combined.
To understand how we got here, we have to see where this environment was born. It began not in Silicon Valley, but almost 2 centuries earlier, in New York. The mechanics of attention trading were born not in code and not in algorithms, but in the dirty streets of Manhattan, in the clatter of printing presses and the smell of cheap ink. This is where the first business emerged that was built on keeping you near it at any cost. In 1833, a young printer named Benjamin Day did the impossible. He released a newspaper, the New York Sun, for 1 cent below production cost. For the first time, he bet on mass scale. He didn't need buyers. He needed eyes, glances, and attention. Before him, newspapers wrote for the elite, the people who controlled capital and politics. But Benjamin Day chose a different path. He created a newspaper for everyone, workers, teenagers, even people who barely read at all. The content was sensational, dramatic, and intensely emotional. And it worked. In a single year, his paper became more profitable than its competitors. In 2 years, it became the largest in the entire city. He created the first model of attention monetization, one that would outlive newspapers, radio, and television. And that model would eventually become the foundation for TikTok and Instagram. To feed this model, Day launched a stream of emotion. Deaths, romantic tragedies, investigations, scandals, anything that produced a spike. The very first note in the first issue was simple and brutal. Melancholy suicide. It hit straight at the emotions. A public tragedy unfolding on the page. Readers couldn't look away. And once it worked, there was more.
It was the Sun that first introduced the principles that would become the backbone of every 21st century feed. Dramatize first, verify later, profit always. The paper printed fake court reports, provoked scandals, invented stories.
And in 1835, Benjamin Day created what today would be called the most successful deepfake in history, a series of articles describing life on the moon, unicorns, bat-winged humans, lunar jungles. People believed it. Circulation exploded, and for the first time, humanity encountered a phenomenon we are now experiencing again, only faster and deeper. Benjamin Day didn't just change the market, he changed the system of information consumption. A simple logic appeared. The stronger the emotion, the higher the sales. The louder the story, the more attention. And the more attention, the higher the profit. The algorithms of the 21st century merely brought this formula to mathematical precision. Benjamin Day didn't read research on dopamine, didn't know about intermittent reinforcement, didn't study neurobiology, but he intuitively discovered what 200 years later would become the foundation of digital dependency. And if the 19th century could change the behavior of millions using only a newspaper, what will the 21st century do? Where every person holds a device that adjusts content to their weaknesses in real time. To understand why scrolling goes so deep, why children lose the ability to concentrate, why adults live in a state of informational tremor, we need to see not only the history of attention, we need to see how thinking itself has changed. The newspaper was the first system of mass attention control, but the real revolution happened later, when not media, but the cognitive mechanism itself began to change. We are used to thinking of the brain as a fixed structure, but that is wrong. The brain is plastic. It rewires itself to match the environment it lives in. For several centuries, text and books shaped the architecture of consciousness. Pages turned into chapters, chapters into long arguments, linearity, sequence, deep, continuous cycles of thought. Books didn't just transmit knowledge, they trained attention. They taught you to hold an idea, to tolerate the solitude of concentration, to move through complexity without tearing your focus apart. Even daily life was different, quiet, slow, with rare news and rare interruptions. Attention could stretch for hours. Today, it collapses in seconds.
When television appeared, many thought it was merely entertainment. But in 1985, Neil Postman showed that TV changed the rhythm of consciousness. It introduced rapid switching, intense visual stimulation, fragmented meaning, emotion instead of argument. What once demanded deep attention now demanded speed. In 1858, thousands of people could stay 4 hours in open field listening to long political debates, with sentences the length of paragraphs. That was normal. 100 years later, during the Nixon-Kennedy televised debates, speech was reduced to 8 minutes. Politics became a visual performance. Kennedy didn't win through arguments, he simply looked better. Media dictated the outcome. Then came the internet.
In the early days, the internet felt simple and safe because you were the one in control. You typed a web address or clicked a link. Then you read at your own pace, and you stopped whenever you needed to. The internet was a place of intention until the main enemy of human attention appeared, the feed. The feed is not a tool. The feed is an environment, a river you step into and lose control of direction. The first feeds were chronological and soft. They showed what you chose. That was friends, acquaintances, or people you added. But even in this soft mode, something shifted. For the first time, the brain adapted to the idea that information arrives on its own, without a request. You stop choosing, and you start waiting. Your attention stops living by the principle of what is important. It begins to live by the principle of what is new. Then intelligence was embedded into the system. The feed became algorithmic. It stopped showing people. It began showing behavior. More precisely, what will keep you here for as long as possible? And this is where the era of attention we live in truly begins. The algorithm is a scanner of human weaknesses. It reads the micropause before your swipe. It tracks the speed of your finger, your reactivity to sound, your emotional response, the likelihood you'll finish a video, and the moment you'll return to the app. After a single day, it knows you better than you know yourself. After a week, it predicts you. After a month, it corrects you. And this is where a familiar question appears. One people ask again and again, is Instagram listening to me? It doesn't need to. Prediction feels like surveillance long before surveillance is needed. Instagram reads your behavior with such precision, the swipes, the pauses, the hesitations, the patterns shared by people like you, that the result feels indistinguishable from eavesdropping. Algorithms don't hear your voice. Your behavior is louder than your microphone. We saw this mechanism on a global scale during the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Data from up to 87 million people was harvested through a single quiz app and used to predict and influence political behavior. Not individuals choosing content, content choosing individuals. And here is the biggest misconception. People think the algorithm adapts to their desires. It doesn't. The algorithm optimizes for your reactions. It doesn't show what you value. It shows what moves you. Even the smallest spark, a quick impulse, a little tension, a rise of emotion. And slowly, the human shifts from being the one who chooses to being the one who is shaped. Platforms aren't trying to make you angry. Anger isn't the goal. They're trying to keep you here. And the easiest way to keep you here is with stimuli that create imbalance. That is why you see sharp headlines, toxic trends, aggressive memes, and waves of viral outrage. And many creators don't even realize it. They simply repeat what the algorithm has already learned to amplify.
Long context begins to fade. In its place comes 3 seconds flashes, 15 seconds bursts of emotions, and slowly, the brain shifts into a short attentional mode, fast, bright, and shallow. Try something with me now. Can you recall the last 5 short videos you watched today in order? Title, creator, message, anything. Most people can't remember even 2. The brain doesn't store the content. It stores only the spike, the hit, the relief. That's not entertainment. That's a loop.
Deep processes such as reading, analysis, or creation no longer feel natural. They feel heavier than they should, and the data reflects it. Nearly 1 in 5 teenagers has faced a major depressive episode. Almost 4 in 10 report persistent sadness and a sense of hopelessness. A generation raised inside the feed is losing the ability to sit with silence without feeling discomfort. And if you're still here, still listening, that's not common. It means there is depth left in you. And with that depth, I want to say this clearly. What comes next is not motivation. It is an engineering plan for escaping the trap that has quietly become our daily environment. But first, we must understand what exactly is breaking the brain. Because without an anatomy of the mechanism, there is no restoration. To understand why the mind is beginning to crack under pressure, it's not enough to say, social media is the reason. That idea is far too small for the scale of the problem. The reality is this: we now live inside an environment the brain was never designed for, one that hits us with stimuli at a frequency nature intended only for danger and survival.
The digital feed imitates both states simultaneously. This is not a metaphor. This is biology. Let's examine the brain the way a neuroscientist examines a complex organ by its circuits. Because attention is not a single function. It's a 3-part system, and each part is now working differently than it should to work.
We begin with bottom-up attention, the lure. This is the ancient mechanism. It reacts to flashes, movement, sound, threat, anything that may matter for survival. Algorithmic feeds are optimized precisely for this mechanism. To hold you, they must supply brighter, more emotional, and more alarming content. Each such stimulus triggers a microsurge of dopamine and cortisol, a combination intended not for entertainment, but for instantaneous mobilization. What once required a tiger in the bushes today is triggered by an 11-second video with a cut transition. The brain does not understand the cause. It understands only the frequency.
All these things described as dopamine hits neglect the fact that if you scroll social media and you see something you really like, dopamine hit. Sure, there's an increase in dopamine.
This state is called hypervigilance light, a mild form of heightened alertness once seen only in people under threat. Now we see that in most teenagers. Next comes top-down attention, the system of focus. This is deliberate attention, the concentration you summon on purpose, the ability to hold a thought and stay with it. It enables reading, learning, deep analysis, even long, sustained ideas. But when bottom-up attention fires without pause, top-down begins to weaken through competitive suppression.
The brain once worked like this. You get distracted, then you notice, then return. Now it works like this. You get distracted, the algorithm gives you a new stimulus before you realize you were distracted. The time between impulse and awareness has been stolen. That is meta-attentional blindness.
The third part is executive control, the internal brake that stops you from impulsive switching. It is responsible for the ability to not check notifications, to return to the task, to finish the thought, to ignore a quick reward. And it suffers the most. Each notification is a bottom-up intrusion, a flash of micro-stress, a restart of the attention cycle. In 2021, in an experiment involving 226 students, smartphones interrupted attention an average of 560 times per day. The average uninterrupted concentration was 47 seconds. After each distraction, the brain required 3 to 23 minutes to return to depth. These numbers sound catastrophic, but they simply show that executive control never gets a chance to activate. The environment does not allow it. Here's the paradox. It's not notifications that distract us. It is us who begin seeking distraction. Because distraction is how the brain tries to relieve the tension that the environment itself is creating. This is called the attentional relief loop, the cycle of attention-based relief. But the most dangerous thing is not the loss of concentration, but the loss of the observer, the mechanism that notices you've drifted. This function is called metacognitive awareness, meta-attention. The brain once worked like this. You get distracted, then you notice, then return. Now it works like this. You get distracted. The algorithm gives you a new stimulus before you realize you were distracted. The time between impulse and awareness has been stolen. That is meta-attentional blindness. A person can scroll TikTok for an hour without noticing the moment their autonomy dissolved. This is not weakness, not laziness, not degeneration. It is a redefinition of the structure of consciousness. We have become people who not only get distracted, we fail to notice when it happens, and the absence of the observer equals the absence of autonomy.
Once you start understanding that your mind can be scheduled into having little thoughts or little blocks of time that you didn't choose, wouldn't we want to use that understanding and protect against the way that that happens?
Here is the conclusion. The algorithmic environment doesn't break the brain all at once. It breaks it circuit by circuit. Sensory filtering becomes overloaded. Working memory gets wiped by constant switching. Sustained attention slowly atrophies. Meta-attention shuts down, and executive control is quietly suppressed. This is not an attention crisis. This is a systemic restructuring of the human cognitive architecture. And if the environment can dismantle the system layer by layer, then, fortunately, it can also be restored layer by layer. But before we move to that, we need to complete the anatomy of the environment to understand why the digital flow became stronger than the human brain. We tend to think the problem is content, that TikTok, Instagram, YouTube provide too much useless stuff. But that is wrong. The problem is not the content. The problem is the mode of delivery. Before the feed, the world was discrete. You moved between tasks on your own. You decided where your attention went. The feed erased that mechanism. It became the first continuous information environment, delivering stimuli at the same rhythm evolution once reserved for threats. The brain treats that non-stop stream almost the same way it treats danger. That's why you catch yourself thinking, I can't stop, or something important is happening somewhere else, or suddenly realize, I have no idea where the last 20 minutes went. This isn't a personal flaw. It's the body reacting biologically to an environment that isn't biological at all. I want to try something unusual. Now I will give you a moment of silence. Not long, just 3 seconds. No sound, no movement, just nothing. If that felt tense or uncomfortable, that's the point. Silence used to be the natural state of the mind. Today, it feels like something is wrong. The algorithm is not a reflection of your preferences. It is a predictive model of your behavior. It does not show who you are. It shapes you.
The faster you switch, the stronger your reaction. The more often you come back, the sharper the model becomes. And here is the part tech companies rarely hide. They want behavioral throughput, a constant stream of action they can measure. The quicker you react, the more signals the system receives. In this equation, speed strengthens the algorithm, not you.
In November 2025, the European Parliament backed a resolution on children and social media. 483 members voted in favor, 92 against, with 86 abstentions. The message was simple. Children under 13 should be banned from social media and AI companions. Teenagers between 13 and 15 should only be allowed in with parental consent. The resolution is not yet binding law, but it marks a turning point. Brussels is no longer treating this as a matter of screen time, but as a mental health emergency. They are openly saying to the platforms, your services were never designed for children, and the experiment ends here.
And the reason Europe finally reacted is simple. This is no longer a behavioral issue, it's a biological one. When a single swipe removes discomfort, the brain stops building its own way to cope. Bored? Scroll. Anxious? Scroll. Lonely? Scroll. Tired? Scroll. Don't want to think? Scroll. This is not addiction to content, this is addiction to the pattern of tension relief. It forms after 8 to 12 weeks of active videos and remains as a new operational mode of the brain. And now we reach the main question: if the algorithm changes the brain piece by piece, can we assemble the brain back? And the answer is yes, but not through willpower, not through motivation, and certainly not by turning off your phone for 3 days.
And there is a small proof that the story isn't one-directional. For the first time in years, some countries are seeing the curve bend the other way. Screen time among younger users is beginning to fall, a trend researchers jokingly call touching grass. A tiny signal, but a meaningful one. The mind still reaches for depth the moment it gets a chance. And even here on YouTube, the pattern is changing. Long videos, the kind that require patience, focus, and presence, are growing again. People are quietly choosing depth over noise. So, now comes the hardest part. How do you restore lost depth without falling into the illusion of total digital abstinence? Because the truth is simple and hard, we will not return to a pre-digital world. We will not stop living in an accelerated ecosystem. We cannot defeat the algorithms, they will only grow stronger. And that is not defeat. Defeat is trying to go back. Victory is learning to live ahead of the environment, not inside it. To restore the brain, we must act not morally, but architecturally. Not through willpower, but through the design of behavior. Not by fighting the phone, but by redefining the space where the phone ceases to be a dominant stimulus. The environment is always stronger than willpower. Focus doesn't come back through effort. It comes back through the space you create around yourself. You don't fight distractions by being strict. You remove the things that trigger them.
Turn off notifications and your activity drops. Open social media only in browser and it becomes less tempting. Take icons off your home screen and the impulse weakens. Switch the phone grayscale and the colors stop pulling your attention. This isn't resistance, it's setting up your environment the way an athlete sets up the track before they run.
Let's talk about long cycles, the lost skill of staying with one thing. A brain trained on fragments cannot drop into depth instantly. It needs long stretches, moments that unfold without interruption. This isn't read for an hour. It's 20 or 30 minutes of doing one task, with one window at one pace, cooking, walking, training, or any hobby without a screen.
Depth is a muscle, leave it unused and it fades. Push it too fast, and a brain addicted to speed treats silence as a threat. Now silence. Today it feels like emptiness, like a missing piece, like something went wrong. But silence is brain's original operating mode. Without it, memory cannot settle, long-term plans cannot form, and anxiety cannot drop. Silence isn't meditation, silence is letting the mind speak inside itself. It returns slowly. 5 minutes without the phone in the morning. Small breaks between tasks. Walks without headphones. Not as a practice, as a condition for a healthy mind.
We live like servers. Too many channels, too many alerts, too many things asking for attention. The problem isn't the information, it's the entry points. To restore attention, don't shrink the world. Shrink the inputs. Fewer inputs create deeper thought. Next comes slowness as strategy. Slowness isn't running away from life. It's taking back control of time. The goal isn't to live slowly. It's to choose when to go slow and when to accelerate. Do one thing slowly, so later you can do 10 things faster. These small stillness windows reset the mind. Speed is harmful only when it's constant. Changing pace brings back cognitive flexibility. Another principle is using the body as an anchor. The world became digital, but attention can be restored only through the physical. Breathing, stretching, or massage, all of it returns the feeling of being present in your own body. Without this grounding, you can't rebuild focus, emotional stability, impulse control, boundaries, or long thought. Many try to fix the mind through the mind. That never works. Restoration begins with the body. Information diet isn't about shutting off the world. It's about order. You won't turn off the internet, but you can turn chaos into ritual.
Ritual means fixed time for news, fixed time for social media, planned entertainment, planned content days, no random browsing. Ritual brings predictability. Predictability softens anxiety, and lower anxiety restores depth. This isn't restriction, it's the start of new cognitive order. Empty zones come next, small moments with nothing inside, no task stimulations or dopamine drip. Add 1 or 2 10-minute pauses a day and within weeks you feel the shift. Impulsivity drops, patience grows, focus sharpens, and the urge to scroll weakens.
Silence feeds the mind, not in a spiritual way, in a biological one. And then comes the deeper work, rebuilding the long chains of thought. Deep thinking isn't something abstract. It's a set of connections that need regular activation. You rebuild them through slow processes, long books, analytical articles, deep videos or podcasts, unhurried conversations, working on paper, writing by hand. This isn't nostalgia. It's training for the prefrontal cortex.
In the end, this is not a fight for productivity or efficiency, it's a fight for autonomy. A person who can't sit in silence, who reads for stimulations every 20 seconds, is a person who has lost the space to choose. The world is accelerating around us, but that doesn't mean that we must accelerate with it. We always have a choice to live inside the environment or ahead of it. You have been on the Dr. Claus channel, a place where we reclaim the right to our own attention. See you in the next videos. Long, honest, and useful.